But it still bothers him not being able to stop it here. It's supposed to hurt him if you have to. And so I went to see a just so that
On the street.
it would show more that you can see little walls moving, so that's what I
So
thought.
church in
Bothered me.
Rapids, pastor was taking 21 years by the time we
Feel like I have
2 minutes. One, two. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Very good. End of test. So, welcome again to Aging Splendidly. Pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Pastor Paul Oman. He is an exceptional person. I suppose we'd call him VIP here. In Tanzania, he'd be a big potato. He is an ordained pastor, which is a hard thing. You go to school for what probably seems forever, and then you wait for the Lord to arrange a call for you, and if all goes as well, then you're there. In addition, he is an artist. As a kiddo, he was an artist, and has continued to do so, to make art. The question was, we're kind of a small setting for an illustrious person. So I'd asked Mary Laurie to speak, and she said, no, have Pastor Paul Oman speak. So I looked at his website, I said, whoa, this is impressive. And so I waited, and then we talked to the Lauries again, and Mary said, well, have you arranged this with Pastor Paul Oman? I says, well, she has decided this is going to happen, and I'm not going to stop it. So, courtesy of Mary Laurie, Pastor Paul, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mary and John. How's the volume? Is that good or too loud? It's good? Okay, if it needs to be changed, let me know, because I want people to be able to hear. I am thrilled to be here today. Paul Oman, somebody asked me about my last name. It is Swedish. Oman. Yes, I forgot your name. Maybe I did. Oh, Lisa. Lisa had asked, because we have shared name and family history, and it was Anderson back in Sweden. And somehow that all got switched and changed as they came over. But not very many Omans around. There are German Omans, I know, with 2 N's or an H and all that in there. And then I have Norwegian heritage as well. My dad would speak Norwegian to my grandmother when they didn't want anybody to know what was going on. Somebody was talking to me, June, I think, right? June, talking to me about that. But in any case, thank you for having me. I'll just tell you a bit about my story, how I got here today. And we have paths in our lives that we do not know how the Lord is going to lead, because I was going to be a veterinarian, guaranteed. Graduated from high school, wrote the whole thing up, going to UW River Falls, animal science, going to head on to the University of Minnesota or wherever I could get into vet school. Started down that path. Once I hit organic chemistry and biochemistry and calculus 2, I said, I think the Lord's calling me in a different direction. And I'd always loved drawing and painting. Am I in the camera view? Okay, now maybe I am. They're trying to live stream this upstairs. Since I was a little kid, I was so inspired in the 70s and the 80s by the wildlife artists, Terry Redlin, David Moss, that whole list of them. Les Cuba, Minnesota artists, oh my goodness. In Minnesota produced some of the best and most competitive wildlife artists during that era. They would always win the federal duck stamp, state duck stamp, and that was a goal of mine, is to compete in the duck stamp. And I did 1 year in 1997, and I realized how underachieving I was at that point in that area. Because the biologists count the feathers, the down feathers, the pin feathers, secondaries, and the primaries on the wings of the particular species that you're entering. And you got an artist there evaluating it, and on it goes. And so I got this green-winged teal from a professional photographer, and I bought the slide from him. He had gotten a close-up. And so I worked for 80 hours, and it had to be small, this size. Submitted it to the state capitol. Anyway, went through that whole process. So that dream lots of dreams die along the way, including the vet medicine. So I switched and became a science teacher, secondary education, and I taught in Hopkins for 6 years, middle and high school earth and life science. I had all these science classes, took a little bit of art for fun in college, just on the side, realized that I could do that well, and it was fun. But who's ever supposed to be an artist, right? Your parents aren't saying, I think you should go on and be an artist or a musician, or, back then anyway. You got to be a doctor, right? Or a lawyer, and on, have something, science and math. And so I had that idea in my mind that I need to work in that direction. Anyway, I get to Hopkins, so I started teaching science by drawing everything. And imagine 7th and 8th graders, they loved that. And it created a rapport with the students. And so instead of just learning the bones when we're talking about the human body, why not draw a skeleton riding a Harley Davidson? And the kids would name the bones as I would draw it. Just things like that, to incorporate art and to make that image or that thing you're trying to teach memorable in the minds of the people who are seeing it or experiencing it. Well, I'd always thought about going to seminary since I was in confirmation. But, I don't know, I just didn't feel like, I didn't want the stereotype of being a pastor. Sorry, John. But, and that, of course, has changed over time.
Really everybody wants to be like John.
I know, we do. And I met John, and I went. I said, the Lord has directed me. And Mary's laughing. But I finally resigned my job as a teacher and went to Luther Seminary here in St. Paul. And I used my artwork during that time, and they used it in the chapel and so forth. And again, I never really thought a whole lot of it. Did my internship in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and then received my first call in Birchwood, Wisconsin, which is close to Hayward, between Rice Lake and Hayward, a little town of 500 people. And it's a mix of retirement people who are moving to the lake for their earlier years of retirement, because these are difficult properties to maintain when you have a huge lake shore and so forth, and the local people who did logging and tourism. So they had 6 months of income. And so there was kind of a tension there, and the church tried to serve all those people, and that has its own dynamic as well. But nonetheless, I started out there, and the church that I served had split from the other church that was 8 miles away. They'd been together since 1948, and I was the first pastor to serve Trinity Lutheran in Birchwood. And Long Lake Lutheran went on its own. And the church that, I didn't know this coming in, they were sure they were going to die. They were sure they were going to close their doors. But there was a new energy that kind of took hold after they had a pastor in place and there was some stability. But those things are difficult because there was some anger between the two churches that had divided because one got the office chair and the other one got the whiteboard or something, and they're not happy about this. You might know how this goes. And so you listen. You sit and listen for a while. And after a few months of listening, we together set a new vision, and off we went. And after being there 3 years, I thought, okay, I've got this idea. I like to watercolor paint a lot. And watercolor is very fast, or can be very fast. So you have to see values, light, middle, and dark. And if you can see and paint those values, contrasts is what I'm talking about, in the right positioning in a painting, it will very quickly open up three-dimensionally to your eye. And I saw something about an artist who used that concept to put huge murals on the side of skyscrapers in New York City. And he said, when you look at that as a little thumbnail, a tiny image at a distance, a small image just a few feet away, it's no different than that big image on the wall when you're driving a car down the street and that thing is a mile up above you. And it will create that same 3D effect. And I thought to myself, what if I could paint the Bible story on a large canvas in front of my congregation and do it in the simplified light, middle, and dark values and have that story open up three-dimensionally within a short period of time. And then we set music to it and scripture readings to it and have it all happen simultaneously. I wonder if this would work. So, but, you know, things in a church, there are gatekeepers in the church. So I'm like, well, I think I'll try this on a non-Sunday, first of all. And when is the time of the year that churches try things a little bit differently? Sometimes. When is that? Summer. Could be summer, yep. How about during the rest of the year? When might another time be? During the holidays? How about during Lent, right? Or Holy Week. So Monday, Thursday, we might have the reenactment of the Last Supper, or Good Friday, something like that. So I thought, let's try Good Friday. Because we had the reenactment on the Thursday of that third year I was there. They trusted me a little bit after 3 years, so I thought, I think I can try this idea. So I painted on a big canvas. It was 80 inches tall. So I'm 72 inches tall. So the canvas was 80 inches, and I had it elevated so I could just barely reach the top with a long brush. And it was 58 inches wide, so about like that. And I painted the Roman centurion, the Roman soldier, coming out of the canvas with a spear and pointing at the audience. And over his shoulders was the silhouette of the crucifixion taking place, the Jesus and the two thieves on the cross. And we I told my choral director, I said, I've got this idea. What do you think? And she said, I love it. I'm like, wow, there's the first gate that opened. And she said, we'll put a choral cantata to this and sing the story and have some narration between the songs as a cantata goes while you paint the story. And I'm like, that's great. I want to add one more component. I have a first-person character portrayal, narration of Barabbas. And I would like someone to read that. And so we had a retired pastor, his name was Merle Reese, and he had this incredibly resonant, low voice. And I said, Merle, would you narrate this first person for us? And we'll split your narration into 3 parts and just divide it up throughout the service. And you're telling the story from Barabbas' point of view, being released and having Jesus go to the cross in your place. And I'll paint that. So I'm up front. I'm as nervous as can be. I'm like, I might get kicked out of this church after I do this. I don't know. But I painted it, and when you're up close, it's pretty abstract, and you have to keep moving in order to make this work. And I thought it was failing. But I realized it worked once I walked to the back of the sanctuary after the service was done, and I turned around and looked over the heads of all the people and at the canvas, and it was 3-dimensional. I mean, it really worked. It opened up. I'm like, I can't believe that. It did not look like that up close to it. And I didn't know what would happen next, though. It's that the word of mouth would take off. And the next year, this little town of 500 people, we had 35 or 40 people come to Good Friday that year. And we had 220 seats in the sanctuary where I served. The next year, we had 220 people come to Good Friday. And that's kind of exciting, but the really interesting thing was the sanctuary was wider than it was long. And so when I was standing up front painting, I could hear behind me, I could hear children talking to parents and grandparents about the story. They were whispering as I painted. And they were guessing. They were like, I think it's Moses. No, that's a fish. Oh, no, there's a bird. Oh, that's the feeding of the 5,000. No, oh, that's the soldier. And so they were going through the Bible stories in what I thought was a non-threatening, kind of a safe way to talk about faith and to talk across the generations about faith. And to me, that was where the strength of the whole thing was right there. So every year then, for the next 5 years, we would paint on Good Friday. I would do something different, a different scene, different aspect. The Via Dolorosa one year, Jesus carrying the cross, contrasting the temple of Jerusalem with Jesus, the temple, body, destroy this body, 3 days. Just different parts of that story we'd lift up, put a different narration with it each year. But word of mouth, I started getting emails and calls. Would you come and paint at our church? And I said, I'm a solo pastor and a congregation. We have 160 people average on a Sunday. I have no time to do that. I've got funerals and weddings and confirmation and so forth. And so then after we'd been there 8 years, my wife and I talked, and we thought, I think this might be the next calling to take seriously instead of saying no to all these requests. So we resigned our call there. I resigned my call. And that was in June of 2011. And I've been doing this ever since. And it's taken me all around the world. I had no idea. I was going to be a vet. And how did that happen? I don't know. That's just, God leads us in different ways. And that's the same with your life. You each have a story. Your story is no less than that. It's just different. And so it's taken me to, all over the United States, but to Tanzania to paint. And my daughter, our middle daughter, she also paints, and she painted in Tanzania as well. At one of these little churches, only 30 people could fit inside, but half of the boards were not even on the church. And the rest of the people were like, no problem, we'll sit outside. And they're all sitting outside. They can see right through the church walls into the church. And they didn't have room for her canvas in there. So let's put her outside, and the people inside can watch out and watch her, and the people outside could watch in, and they wanted me to preach while she was painting. So that was kind of fun. But with the natives in Alaska, with the Episcopal Diocese, I work with all denominations. I'm an ELCA Lutheran pastor. But they had me up there in 2019. And the Episcopal Church has the resources to charter an airline, and they chartered Alaska Airline and another airline to fly in their delegates from all the bush villages to Anchorage that year for this. And so I got to sit for a week with these native people, and they all brought their iPads. I thought that was kind of strange, but they had their iPads, and they're like, we want to show you what it's like to go walrusing. Walrusing. Oh my goodness, whaling, and they're whipping through their pictures. See there, it's out on the ice. We got this big one. Or here's our cabin on the Yukon River. And for them, the Bible stories came so alive. When we talked about the miraculous catch of fish, they would start telling stories of walking out on the thin ice and seeing the fish go underneath, and how they would poke holes in the ice and string the net under, catch the fish in the net and pull it up. They had to watch out so they didn't fall through early in the season. It's phenomenal how contextualized their story was, paralleling the Bible story. And wherever I get invited, I do my best to take it seriously as possibly another call, God's call. So I've been invited to paint with inmates in prisons. And the first prison I went to was Jackson Correctional in Black River Falls, Wisconsin. I was nervous. I've never been in a prison. I don't know what's this going to be. And I get there, and it's at night. They want me to come in and do this program. It's dark. And I walk in where you check in, visitor center, you get scanned, the whole thing. You got to leave all this stuff behind and all your paperwork. And they said, you're going to be diagonally across the whole compound. And you have to walk through the whole open area. There'll be a lot of the guys sitting out there on picnic tables in the open, but just take your stuff and walk through. And I'm like, is anybody go with me or something here? But they did. There were 2 people walked with me. But these are some of the most, I mean, the gospel is very much alive in the prison when finally some of the people, when they realize we're at the end of our rope, we got nothing left. And hearts are softened. And so I walk into the gymnasium. There's a 12-man contemporary band rehearsing with electric guitars. Excuse me. And then a little while later, 30 more men come in as the choir, and they rehearse. And yeah, maybe just back that off just a touch. And so they have their whole worship service planned. I asked the chaplain 2 weeks before I got there, I said, I want you to ask the guys what story they want painted, and then let me know, and I'll paint that. And he got back to me a few days later, and he said, the guys all met, and they said, we want the story of the prodigal son. And then the chaplain said, and they wanted me to tell you why. What they said was, because we feel like the whole world has forgotten about us in here. That was their answer. So I painted the prodigal son story and the embrace of the father around the son who had ran away. Excuse me. All this to say, art, the visual arts, I think, have a way of transcending sometimes what words cannot do. And we'll go places, thank you, go to places where we cannot go with people. However, you have to be careful saying that around seminary environments because the scripture does tell us that faith comes through hearing. So what I'm always conscious of doing, right, John, is you put the spoken word with the visual word, or the sung word in a song with the visual word. So I want to share a couple things with you. And my ministry, I've named it Drawn to the Word. Drawn to the Word. This all came about because Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church in Apple Valley, that large church down here, they had me come down there and paint, and they had seminary professors there one day. This was a year before I left my call as a pastor. And they had an event, and they called it Drawn to the Shepherd. And I thought, well, that's kind of a fun play on words. How can I make it more all-encompassing? So I named this Drawn to the Word. And thankfully, no one had taken this title once I tried to trademark it or whatever, you know, as you do when you set up a company. Or that sounds so business-like, company. A ministry, right? From the government's point of view, it's a business. Well, there you go. Okay, so I was going to do that video first, but can we go to an image first? Are you able to jump to that, or will that throw everything off?
One of the, PowerPoint's up. Is that what you're
Yeah, the PowerPoint
Yeah, that's right.
image.
You just got to select which one you want.
Ooh. I'll just use this.
Just do the slide.
Which one?
The clicker doesn't seem to be working right. I can click it forward.
Okay. I'll just take a look there. Yeah. No, let's go to this one right there. All right, I'm going to have you guess. I put an image up here. This was last Sunday. I was painting at an evangelical free church in Winona, Minnesota, Pleasant Valley Church, and they had me in to do 2 big paintings. They're having me back for 2 more. Any guesses on that story, that Bible story? Yeah. Yes. So the story of Jesus out on the water and the disciples in the storm in the boat. And there's several different variations of this story depending on which gospel you're looking at. But here I was depicting the one in the Gospel of Mark in particular, where Jesus is walking across in the 4th watch of the night. He's been watching the disciples struggling all night after he'd fed the 5,000, sent them out in the boat to cross the Sea of Galilee. The storm has come up, and they're terrified. The Israelite people are not a seafaring people like the Phoenicians were. And so they had all these stories and ideas of Leviathan and these monsters in the deep. And when they were out on the sea, it was even scarier yet because their imaginations were just going wild with these ideas. Jesus comes to them on the water, and it says he comes to them and climbs into their boat and then calms the sea. Isn't it? Peace be still. With just a word, there's the spoken word. Jesus speaks the word, and has power over creation. And just the speaking of that word, just as God did at the very beginning, speaks the word and it happens. You can go to the next one. I won't be, this just shows, you can go to the next one. Let's continue to the next one. I'll go to one more. All right, so this painting is huge. It's big. It's 7 feet by 5. It's in a church in Inver Grove Heights. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little washed out here in this scene, but sometimes I will paint thematically instead of a particular story. And any guesses at what some of the themes might be, just looking at the imagery here? Baptism. Mm-hmm. Creation. Beautiful world. Holy Spirit. Resurrection, the open tomb on the right. The picture is chopped off a little bit up at the top, but so all of those things are incorporated in here, and the overarching theme was the water of life, and particularly with baptism. And so I thought, let's have a hand extending in. It could be the creative hand of God, lifting, reaching up out of the water, and then Jesus himself being baptized, or that could be anyone standing there with arms up, and the Spirit, the dove, resting upon him. Then we have birds over here on the side. Imagine these little birds. Anybody into birding in here? You know what kind of bird that is? They're common along the Mississippi Flyway. That is the common yellowthroat, a little warbler, a male and a female there. I like those, so I put them in there. And just the drips in the water, the ripples, and a lily. Okay, how about the next image, Mark?
Where did you see the birds that you've seen them in life?
I have. They're usually in marshy areas along water. That's why I put them in here.
By your home? Or
Yep, they're out in Wisconsin. I'm from Amory, Wisconsin, there now. But they're all over the place in here. And this one some of these pictures are cropped a little bit. But nonetheless, you can guess this story, perhaps. You're afraid you're going to guess wrong, aren't you? I'll tell you in case you're thinking it. So yes, the Passover story. And I will more often as possible, not paint the face of Jesus. I mean, I've had a few churches tell me, we want the face of Jesus and we want it clear. And I'm like, how do I do that? I mean, that is the tallest order. I don't know. And you have, and so I painted in Shanghai, China, and you realize when you go to different places, Jesus is depicted like the people of that culture. Tanzania, same thing, right? And so here you have an oriental-looking face. And then if I'm pushed on that, I try to default to, well, we'll try and have a Palestinian look, since Palestine is the land where Jesus came from, or was out of that. Look, but if possible, I turn them away, and so that the painting will hopefully, most of my paintings anyway, I try and design it so that you as the viewer might feel as though you are part of the audience. You're overlooking the shoulders and you'll be the next person in the scene, being invited right in. Okay? And so on this one I included a basin of water, and this jug could represent all kinds of different things. The grapes, the wine, the bread, of course. And then I had the 12 disciples in here. Well, there's one up there. Some might be cut off, so you might try and count them and not end up with 12 here. But who's who? I don't know. And perhaps you might see your own face in there, or your own expression too, is what I always am hoping. And Judas would be in there somewhere as well. Okay, we can go to the next. What story is this? The prodigal son was my intention of this one, yes. And so, I should have my laser pointer, I didn't bring it along. But the father, But that's the beauty of art. Is this a laser pointer? Oh, thank you. That's the beauty of art, is that people will interpret various stories, or they can land on different things instead of exactly what I was intending. But when we do this one's up in East Grand Forks, a big painting. I had the father enjoy running. And when you study this out of the Middle Eastern culture, you discover that men, especially older men, never ran because it would bring shame upon the culture to have your skin, your legs exposed. So for the father to run, right away when the Jesus audience hears this, they're aghast. They're like, you shouldn't do that. That's shameful. I mean, that seems strange to us. But the father's running. The older son is angry. Remember that? The younger son is dejected, dragging his staff in, coming in from the distant hills. And when the people hear that, oh, he was eating the pods that the pigs ate, the Jewish audience was thrilled, because that's what he deserves. It's exactly what he deserves for shaming his father by taking his half of the inheritance while his dad is still alive and wasting it. But he comes back in and the father shows mercy and runs to him. Now the audience is mad. A father should never show mercy to a son like this. But, get the fatted calf, start celebrating. And this son, the oldest son, it was the duty of the oldest son in Jesus' day to enter into the home to begin the party. And it says he refused to come in. We miss that in English. He refused to come in to start the party. So he doubled the shame, doubled down. The father was shaming himself by running and giving mercy to the son. The younger son shamed the father. The older son now shames the father by not coming in to start the party when he's saying, we're going to celebrate. We're bringing the community in. And the whole community back here is a part of this honor-shame culture. And so the father bears all the shame for both the lawbreaker and the law keeper, who both did their worst to him so he could do his best for them. See that? Art has a way, I think, of helping us enter into the story. And I'll put other things. Here's a goat and a sheep. It might evoke that Matthew 25 story, or different stories as well. How about another image? On the right? Ooh, excellent. Any guesses? It's one of the resurrection stories. The road to Emmaus? Yes, the road to Emmaus. And off they go. The two disciples, a stranger comes up and walks with them, begins taking them through the story of the Old Testament, showing them that, that Messiah was to come and to die and to be raised. But their eyes are kept from recognizing him. Isn't that interesting? They knew Jesus, but they couldn't tell who he was until they got to their home back here in the distance. And out of a sense of honor, would not let a stranger, even a stranger, pass by when it is evening. You would invite them into your home to stay overnight. If they wouldn't have made that invitation, that would have been shameful. That's different than our culture. We're very individualistic. There's shame in our culture, but it's different. The shame is shared and owned by everybody. And it still is in the Middle East today. So then when they break bread, their eyes are opened. So one of these strangers, one of these disciples is named. Do you know what his name is? From the story? Cleopas. And what's the name of the other one? You're right. There is no name. So, you will see two men depicted oftentimes, but when you study that, I think it's probably a man and wife, because often women were not named in the story, and they're going back to their home. I don't know. So I intentionally try to make someone, this might look more feminine, or I don't know. And I had this person turned around, like, they were so engaged in the conversation, finally they're walking backwards, like, Jesus, don't you get this? You have to imagine these things, because we don't have pictures, of course. And the town of Emmaus they're not even sure where that is today over there. So, and let's go to the next. I can see I'm going to run way out of time unless we chop some of this. I will do one more here. Oh, I could advance that too. That's right. This will be a tough one to guess. So you could come up with many things. If we could see the whole painting, there's actually a dove up above here. So I painted this in front of 400 kids at Lake Wapagasset Bible Camp. Late in the evening, I'd paint from 9 to 10 at night, every Wednesday night out there. Done that for about 10 years. And their passage one summer, their main theme was Isaiah 43. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned. Something like that. For I am the Lord your God. Okay. So I thought, how can I make this look ominously scary and powerful, and then give it scale so it looks huge? That's what a figure will do, a tiny little figure. If this person was like this tall, these waves wouldn't look so big. But if you make that person tiny, now this looks very overwhelming. And then I used ultraviolet glow paint on this painting, and the kids go crazy for that. So I had streams of light coming in, and I had a big cross in the sky. These are all invisible, and the dove was all lit up with glow paint. But it didn't show up until the end. We dropped the lights, and the ultraviolet lights came on, and it was dark in the room. And here, this person that felt alone was no longer alone. I think I had the silhouette of a Jesus figure over here standing next to them, or a person next to it, something like that. So they were not alone, but then when the lights came back on, they appeared alone. For I am the Lord your God. You know, the Holy One of Israel, who will not leave you. So we try and use art to tell that story and to tie people to the story. Okay, so that's one of the things I do is I paint live. That's the main thing I do in front of big canvases. But the last few years, we have started doing these big paint-by-number community murals. Now, if you're familiar with Concordia College in Moorhead, or I think Luther College does this too, they have in the past had big paint-by-numbers, and they would put them behind the Christmas concert. And so that's really where the idea originated from. I mean, paint by number is not new, so I thought I'm just going to do paint by number. We'll get the community involved, especially after COVID. Churches were looking for ways to bring people back together. And pastors were wondering, if people do come back, are they going to stay? You know, because they've been disconnected for a while. So I have a video we can go to. That's the very, that's on my website. Did he embed that one in there? Yeah, I think that very first one. This is the one there, that one. So I try and design one or two new community murals every year. They take an enormous amount of time to design. It's like a huge stained glass window. Faith Lutheran Church in Coon Rapids, that's Kevin Doley, the pastor, their church did one of these a couple of years ago, and they created a really nice video that explains the process, how their people were involved. And this will show you another way that the arts can draw people into the Word. Excuse me. Okay. We'll see if we can get this working, and if not, we'll just move on to the next thing.
Oh, it's on that screen. It's on the other screen.
And there should be sound with this. This might be blocking your view over here. Yeah. So we'll see if we can get this going, and then after that, I will do a quick little live painting demonstration for you, and that should take us to the end of the time. What's that? Yeah, you can back it up to the beginning. There we go. And can you enlarge that? Full screen. Can you see here?
The Advent mural was a project that we had thought about with Paul Oman that brings our community together. So we might work on our little corner, but it's part of something bigger. And with over 200 people involved, it's pretty exciting when we can, as a community of faith, see what we accomplish together.
Mark, can you turn that up just a
Doing
touch,
this
please?
project, the questions come up, well, what is Advent? And we're able, while we're painting, to be able to talk about Advent is about preparation. It's about waiting. It's about the coming of the Messiah. And then what was interesting is in the mural itself, Paul Oman has put in different stories like the prodigal son, and he has different imagery that just raise the curiosity. And so our children are asking questions, our adults were asking questions, and it was just a natural extension of this mural of how we could do life together.
What I saw during the paintings, the people all coming together, different ages, people I've never seen, little kids coming with parents, older people. It was kind of a gathering. And you could just see how excited they were. They just couldn't wait to get down there and paint.
This mural project was important as part of a goal of connecting. You know, it's interesting. We have people coming from different suburbs. They live in this suburb, they work in this suburb or downtown. They go to school in this particular suburb and they come to church here. They don't see one another during the week. But as we come together, just the relationships and the conversations begin to happen organically and just naturally. And it's a way of building relationships. And so it's more than just a mural. I think God is weaving a tapestry of more than just paint. It's the relationships, it's the memories, it's the hope that Advent really conveys.
I feel the greatness of this whole project was brought people together, an interest, young, old. It was really, I think, a wonderful gathering of our congregation. I think on Sunday when they come and they see this and it's unveiled, they are going to just, whoa. I think we all will, to see these great big huge canvases up there. And I think as time goes by, wherever it's hanging, they will say, oh, I painted this part right here. Oh, this is what I did. It'll all bring them back.
One evening I came into the fellowship hall and we had some people that were painting the mural that I hadn't met before. But what I was taken aback was the joy. A big smile on their face as they're concentrating and they're painting, but it was just the joy. And because of their smile, I had joy also, because it was a delight to see everyone working collaboratively to make something of significance that we all can enjoy.
Okay, so that gives you a little idea of how those projects have gone. That's been a lot of fun to see churches come together around that. And that's how the art transcends some of these artificial boundaries that otherwise might be there. Age, denominations, so forth. So I'm going to switch over and do a quick little painting for you. You ready for that? So we may have to turn off the projector if possible. I'll put that up here. We'll watch it fall down. Wait, Mary can help me? No. I've got a tarp here. I better throw that down. I don't want to wear out my welcome too fast. There we go. Perfect. So on this quick little painting, I'm just going to do a value sketch of this. Will this work for the cameras? And if you can't see, like if you're up here, you might have to move back further. That'd be you guys. You're not moving no matter what? Okay. So what, yeah, we could turn these lights on here, please. So a question I get asked quite a bit is, what are the most common stories you get asked to paint? And I get asked to paint something with the Good Shepherd a lot. And I get asked to paint the road to Emmaus a lot. And then after that, as maybe the feeding of the 5,000, just some of the more common stories like that. But I thought I would quickly try and show you how I work values. And since the canvas here is already all white, and I'm going to take that Good Shepherd story, or Psalm 23, or John 10, and see if we can make something come alive in just a couple of minutes out of this. So I put a little sketch on here of some sheep and a shepherd with a sheep being carried over its shoulders as they do. They'll hoist it up and over and bring a lost sheep back or something like that. Well, what I need to do is figure out, where do I want the sunlight coming from, or the light, whatever the light source is. And I'm thinking on this one I'll have it up high and just behind, kind of a backlighting, so it creates rim lighting on shoulders and on the back of the sheep. And if that's the case, these sheep, even though they're white, will not be white when you paint them. They're going to be much more shadowed than that. I'm using some brushes I got at Menards. They're a little larger. So when I'm painting these large canvases, I can paint like a 7 foot by 5 foot in just a little less than an hour. So you have to have big brushes, and you have to keep moving, or you won't get done. And you have to not pay a lot of attention to detail, but just simply the values, okay? So that's basically just an outline. Let's have an ear sticking out that side of its head too. That sheep might be a little skinny or not have as much wool as it could, but we get the idea. And if it's drinking out of water, reflections are vertical like that. So you'll see that reflection take place. Now that might look oversimplified because it's just one shape. I just painted in the shape. But when I'm doing this with color, I can use any color that I want in there as long as it's that right value, that right darkness. And so my sheep will be filled with colors: pinks, rose, greens, blues, violets, purples. If I want them to be that way. Or I could make it more realistic, and they actually are the color of the wool, which is usually kind of a yellowish, dirty, whitish, yellowish. So let's have a sheep that's standing more towards us here, like so. And now, how in the world do we paint the head of that sheep? Well, if the light's coming from behind, there are the ears. We could just kind of suggest that there's a little light touching the right side of its face, like so. And this is where 3 values gets a little overly simplified. Let's add some white and add another value in here, a little lighter. But if I went over the top of some of these sheep, I can define that rim lit area of light. You see how that starts to stand out on the back of the sheep then? Get that in there. I'm going to go around this side here, and then we'll just let that disappear. I'll bring this up into the Good Shepherd. And I can darken this. Since it's acrylic paint, I can always paint over or adjust, repaint. I don't want to do that during a church service, though. every brush stroke really has to count, or it just doesn't have the effect. Okay, so then here's the shepherd's hair and head, face, something like that. And then I'm going to have it extend down into the shadows of the legs of the lamb or the sheep that's over his shoulders. And here will be the face of the sheep, the ears. We'll just lightly, I can always go back in and make some changes. Now I have a real dark value I'll bring in here too, but I don't usually do that right away. We'll get some of these are called mid-values, middle values laid in here. Let's have a curious sheep, maybe it's a mama sheep, looking over, like, okay, I gotta pay attention here. I don't want any of my little guys running off. Maybe suggest a few. And then the trick after a while is how many can you paint, or no, how few can you paint and make it look like there are hundreds of them. So, because you want to try and capture that sense also that, you know, there's just a few touches here after a while. You're like, there's a flock of sheep. They're all over the place. And there. And if this sheep is in front of water also, which then we'd have these reflections extending downward like so. Okay. And light that's coming in. Whoops, I knew that was going to happen. That keeps you awake and interested there. Well, it's okay, Mary, I've got my hand on here. But when I read the stories and I think about how I'm going to depict it, I'm usually trying to depict a moment of grace or mercy or release or forgiveness or of surprise. And here it's the return of the sheep that was lost back to the flock. At least that's my interpretation of what that could be here. So how do we get that sheep to stand out on the shoulders? Let's add some dark around that. Just like so. And let the shaft of light still come in and touch the top of the Good Shepherd's head. But once you can see the values, then you're really freed up to just move with painting in color. And we are almost out of time here. So let me drop a dark value in just so you can know what I'm talking about. The dark value is tricky because you need some of it, but it can really, watch when I put this spot in there. What does that do to the rest of the painting? It all of a sudden it changes it, doesn't it? Everything else became much lighter, and your eye will go to this. So you have to use it in the right spot in the right way. How about I darken just the nose coming down to get water? Perhaps the leg there, just a little bit, without overdoing it. And maybe there's a rock or two that's dark in the water, different sizes, like that. And perhaps there's just a few little dark touches here and there, but not too much. It'll change things. Well, I had one more little sketch in here, and I thought, what if we add a sheep right here? We're looking at it from the back side, and this sheep is very curious, looking over its back. We need some dark here to get this side of the sheep to stand out. Some dark over here. The sheep standing on the grass. And perhaps, just perhaps, that will give you the appearance that you're looking. See the ears of the sheep there and the back of its head. that's lifting its head up, you know, kind of looking out, and here's the tail would be right here. Something like that. But maybe you're the next sheep looking in. And we could have a few more reflections and whatever. But that would be a value sketch approach in real quick fashion as to how I would approach a painting. And the last thing on these, there's not really a space for me to do this, but I take white, I add highlights at the end. You can add just, see that white? There's another sheep. Here's a sheep. There's another one. Just that touch, that little kiss of light, sunlight here and there, can suggest lots of things. If you lose some white like the back of the sheep, maybe I want that to continue there. Just highlight that a bit. If I lost it right there, I can bring it back in, and so forth. Like that. So that's kind of how I approach the actual live painting. So, okay, do you have any questions? Because we need a little Q&A time. John?
You use the word value a lot.
Yeah.
Could you say some more about what you're saying when you?
Yeah, okay, so do you know what contrast is?
Yep.
Contrast, it's just substitute that word for value. So, like, contrast between the white and the black. High contrast, high difference in value. And so there's an infinite number of values between white and black, but we can just simplify it to like 3 or 4 or 5 values. So we have light, middle, and dark. And and that's what everything is. I mean, if you just take a picture of everybody sitting in this room, if you squint your eyes and put your eyelashes in front of your eyes, you will see the values right away. See, can you tell what's the lightest thing you see right away? Sure, it's the light on the floor there. It's the light coming through the chair, the light off that silverware. What's the darkest thing? Those pants, that shirt, that water bottle, this projector thing. See, you see the values right away. And so when I paint, I squint a lot. I'm up front, I'm always like this, looking at it like, is it dark enough? Oh, there it is. You know. So that's why I'm getting all these lines here. That's fine. No, it's worth it for a good painting, right?
So that was spectacular. My
Thank you.
only question is when to applaud. I suggest now.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Wildly impressive. So I've asked Pastor Paul to stay for a bit, and he happens to have brought more than one beautiful piece of art in back, and so I will leave you all to it, and many thanks.
All right, thank you so much. I can answer your questions back there.